Over the course of a single day, a family of four unravel in a mess of guilt and resentment as all of their deep-seated grievances come to light. Sidney Lumet season continues with another film based on a play. Today we discuss A Long Day's Journey into Night. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
For the love of God, woman.
This is a movie podcast, and we are working through Sidney Lumet season here. This is our second episode of the season, and today we are looking at his film from 1962, which is called Long Day's Journey into Night. So that is what we're going to talk about today. And much like the last movie we did by him, was a play originally. And
yes.
It was... This one was even more obvious, I thought, because it really did never leave the one house. Like, it was very clear this was very much a play to begin with. But that's not a bad thing. Sometimes the best movies are adapted from plays because they're good, you know, good stories with good acting. You get all these things. So we'll get into all this, of course. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you warning before we go into the spoilers. And of course, if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch if you do. And you can support everything over at Patreon or YouTube membership and get some bonuses. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So, Long Day's Journey into Night is about a family, a mom and dad, and two grown-up sons. You know, they're adults. And basically, over the course of one day, starting in the morning, and as you'd expect, going sometime into the late in the night, they have ups, they have downs, they share secrets, they have regrets, they reveal truths, they blame each other for things, and they kind of reveal their characters and their inner demons over the course of the movie. Or I should be more specific and say over the course of the almost 3 hours of the movie.
Yeah, I remember we finished our last recording session and Pete said, "Oh, hey, this movie is 2 hours and minutes long." And I said, what was that? What was that minute section? I'm hoping I heard like 11. And you're like, no, it was 54. And I'm like, oh, great. Love it.
Yeah, it was so weird because I don't always check what the next one's going to be, but I just had a sneaking suspicion. This feels like it could be a long one for some reason, and I sure enough...
It's in the title, Pete. It's a long day's journey.
Yeah, you could be a detective. That's good. That's good reasoning, that. Yeah. Very good. But yes, so yeah, this stars Katharine Hepburn, who's obviously, I think, the big name here, and here is the mum as Mary. And then, of course, you have the father, James, played by Ralph Richardson, and you've got the two sons. The older of the two is Jamie, played by Jason Robards, and the younger son, interestingly, is played by Dean Stockwell. His name is Edmund. Very young Dean Stockwell here.
Yes.
I'm so used to him, and he's like 40s to 60s kind of range. This was like 20-something Dean Stockwell, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, that's the cast. I mean, there's a couple of minor roles that you see other than that, but that is the 4 characters that we are spending this time with, and we get different combinations of these characters where it's just the mum and one son, mum and the other son, dad and one son, dad and the other, the husband and wife, the brother and brother, and we go through all those possible combinations by the end of the movie, and things are revealed. It is very much a single setting drama where they reveal a bunch about their backstories and maybe dip into a bit of a monologue here or there, if you if you want to call them that. So yeah.
It's hard to consider it a monologue when it's just so consistent. Like, even when it's a dialogue, it's a monologue.
Well, I mean, the dictionary would disagree with you there, but I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I assume you hadn't seen this, but like, were you familiar with the title in general? Because it has been adapted a few times. It's been a running play for a long time.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the play itself nor the title. I will say I've heard of it, and reading the Wikipedia page on it, it's listed as the magnum opus of the author and also one of the greatest American plays of the 20th century. So I feel like that's kind of just a thing where you hear it if you're in sort of theater circles for a while, and you know, I was in those circles for a while, so yes, I've heard the name, but I couldn't tell you anything about it, and definitely did not know of this 3-hour long adaptation of it.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the play's probably about the same length if I was to guess.
Oh yeah, this feels like a 1-for-1. Like maybe they cut some stuff, maybe they made some small changes, but for the most part, it feels like a 1-for-1 of exactly what it. If anything, the only thing that was missing was the intermission.
You can tell where it goes though.
This is a instead of a 2-act play or 3-act one, this is actually a 4-act play, and I think it's very obvious where the different cuts are, because it literally is time skips in the movie itself where we move ahead slightly each time.
Yeah, although the first one has kind of like a connective little beat, so that first one's maybe not quite as obvious, but the other ones are very, very obvious because they are just skip ahead. Now it's dinner time, skip ahead. Now it's sometime in the night. You know, like, that's very much clear to see. So yeah, I mean, we'll get into our feelings then. We'll get into kind of more of the stuff. I mean, I feel like a lot of what they talk about is probably more spoiler because it's really the only thing to spoil. So we'll probably avoid talking about a lot of that. But needless to say, a lot of family demons and relationship issues come out over the course of the movie. So, David, what did you think of A Long Day's Journey into Night?
I think it is a very well-made adaptation. I think that the acting is really the major focus of the movie is it's a character piece. It is all 4 of these characters, and it is allowing the actors to just go absolutely ham with it. Like, they are on a tour de force. Every single one of them has such a depth to their characters and such a deep understanding. They have such good emotion, and we said before that there's all the different pairings going on of like the mom and the dad, the 2 brothers, mix and match there. All of the different pairings work. I don't think there's a single pairing where I thought, well, you know, that one didn't really have a lot to talk about, or that one felt a little bit weak. Every single one of these felt very, very strong. And I think nobody in here delivered anything close to a bad performance. I just don't think it needed to be 3 hours long. That's my thing. I think I appreciate that they were going so in depth with the character stuff, but I felt at a certain point that there was only so many times where the mother character could say, "I'm going upstairs for a nap," and someone says, "By the love of God, woman, get back down here." I'm like, that happens at least 17 times in this movie. It's not something where it doesn't feel like it's making forward progress. I do feel like these characters are talking and they're discovering more about each other. They're opening up in ways that's clear they haven't before, but it also, from an audience perspective, I don't know. It's just something, when it came to a movie, I think there could have been more trimmed out to make it flow a little bit better. On a play, I can absolutely see this working because as an audience, you are more enraptured. They are right there in front of you. They are real breathing people, and you get to connect with them in a way that even people who love movies much more than I do not have that level of connection. There's always that disconnect of the screen in the middle. And I feel like we could trim this down to at least 2.5 hours, probably even less, and we still would have gotten everything across that we needed to get across. So it's a faithful adaptation, but that might be the only thing that I think is working against it in some ways, is that there were long swaths where I felt like, yeah, let's just move ahead a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that I kind of agree with a lot of that, and that acting is good. I think the direction is very good. There's a couple of, it's not overly flashy, but there's 1 or 2 moments where the camera does like frame things a certain way that I thought were quite impactful, and I really like, oh, this is a good moment. I do agree though that it didn't need to be 3 hours long, and that just adapting the whole play without taking anything out is kind of its biggest detriment, especially since, like, you know, what my complaint last time we did The Fugitive Kind, which I generally quite liked, was that once or twice Marlon Brando went into a bit of a monologue that felt a bit too overwritten and flowery, because it's the type of thing you hear in a play where they want to do their monologue. In this movie, like, even from the start, is guilty of a lesser version of that. Right from, but it was okay though, because it was like, okay, this is this type of movie, everyone's going to talk like that, it's fine. However, the back half of the movie, they get even more like that, where they go more deep into it, to the point where they start quoting like plays and literature at each other, and I'm like, okay, all right, I get it, but come on. And I think the thing for me, though, in the back half of the movie especially, that I felt that was kind of dragging it out, is that there was multiple scenes where two characters would be having like this really back and forth conversation, and they would do this thing where they'd be having a calm conversation, and then one of them would get angry and start yelling, start saying some stuff, but then they would calm down. And the best example I can give you, actually, is there's an extended sequence where the father's talking to the younger son, Edmund, right? And they're actually talking for a little bit first, but once they get into the scene properly, they say, let's play a game of cards. And they sit down with the cards, and like things will get heated. The dad will stand up and make a bit of a speech, and they'll go, oh, why am I talking like this? Forgive me, let's play some more cards. And they go back down. I swear, are we going to continue this game of cards? That sentence in some variation is uttered like 6 times because he keeps going up and down. This like we explode in the scene, and then we like retract back into acting kind of normal, and then we explode again in anger. And it felt like there was multiple scenes that the older brother does it afterwards, all in the same part of the movie, where he's like getting angry, but then he comes back down. He's kind of and he's drunk, so I guess it kind of works because it's like drunk people do act a little bit erratically. But even the mum early on, right from the start of the movie, she's kind of erratic, where she's like going into like these like fits of hysteria, but then she's like going back down and she's being normal again. And I'm like, I think the overall plot of this movie and some of the moments are fantastic. I think there's some great moments in this movie, but I really feel like you could easily get this down to 2 hours or even less than 2 hours, and it would be better for it, because you'd be trimming down all of these long-winded scenes to something that's a little bit tighter, and it would still just be conversations in a house or around the outside the house. It would still just be that. I think it works perfectly well in that setting. It doesn't need to be any more flashier. It just needs to tighten up. And there was multiple scenes, especially in the back half, where I'm like, okay, I can sort of almost feel the writer just loving the sound of their voice as they're writing all these words out.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so just as a little bit of backstory here, this is written by playwright Eugene O'Neill, and there's no other writers on this movie credited, so I do think it is just a straight adaptation, like not even adapted for screen. I think it's just straight, because I think it was dead by this point when it was released. However, if you look at Eugene O'Neill's backstory, he has a father named James, a brother named Jim, another brother named Edmund, and a mother named Mary. Like, this is his family. This is a very deeply personal story of him describing his family as he saw it. And from that perspective, I get wanting to go on these long segments, because it is something where it's so deeply personal that you want to get it right. You want to get all of these different aspects right. You want to allow the nuances of these characters to really shine through, and you get the feeling that this keeps happening. This isn't something where it's a once a day sort of explosion or a once a week sort of thing. This is something where it is just this constant give and take of everyone has these explosive personalities, but then they realize they're a family and that this isn't becoming of them, and they need to like calm down a little bit. And we keep on doing that ebb and flow. But yeah, it just could have cut like 3 ebbs and 3 flows. Like it could have just trimmed it back a little bit.
It's that thing. All you have to do is the rule of threes. You just do start off normal, get angry, calm back down. There you go. You've shown the progression of like losing temper and then like saying, no, we're a family, we have to calm down. But it does it 4 more times. In the same scene, no less. Not in the rest of the movie. I'm talking about in the same scene, it does it 4 more times. So that's the movie's biggest issue for me, where while I liked it and I generally thought it was of a high quality and I was into what it was doing with the characters, there was definitely times where, especially in that last hour, where I was really feeling kind of the I don't know, kind of a little up its own ass in the writing, where it really wanted the characters to have all these moments where they were getting to chew the scenery, because it kind of becomes this thing where each one gets their own chance to have a monologue. Again, they're never really alone. It's always to someone else, but almost everyone gets at least one scene with another character where they get to make their big monologue, where they're talking about their regrets and their hopes and what their dreams were when they were younger and blah, 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 blah. So
I think the term you're looking for is the soliloquy.
There you go, the soliloquy. Hey, that'll do.
They step up to the front of the stage, they get in front of the audience and go, ahem.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly what probably happens on stage, and when the play version, they probably step out to the front and talk to the audience. Like that's what they do. Here, though, they're just doing it to each other.
And again, you mentioned in there that the directing has these splashes. It has these splashes of like really inspired framing, really inspired camera choices. I think it's something that escalates throughout the movie, is that by the time we hit the last act, I feel like it really has a lot more of these shots that are very specifically chosen, just by nature of how this is done. It's very long shots, very set in like one place, and then maybe the camera will move in and out a little bit, but it very rarely cuts. By the time we hit the fourth act, there's a lot more frequent cutting as we get more and more heated, and I feel like that's very intentional to try to ratchet up this feeling of emotion and try to get this to feel like it is climaxing rather than just being the same ebb and flow we've had at the first 3 acts.
And the direction's pretty much flawless. Like, this is the weird thing. Any complaints I've got here is more just the being a slave to the original text so much that they don't trim it down for movie's sake. And it's interesting though, because screenplays do have, I suppose they have stage direction still in a play, but like I'm just, the stuff that's in a film script that wouldn't be in a play script, and I do wonder, like, is there kind of like a Sidney Lumet, like sort of little like set of post-it notes that you put on each page of like, okay, this is what I'm putting in here for the my side of things, because I need to turn it into a movie. I need to think about how this is staged specifically in a house where we do have a wall on all sides and we're doing that kind of thing.
I mean, even beyond that, the idea of the close-up, like you can't have a close-up when you're on stage, so choosing when to do that is just a very conscious choice as well, and I think he does it very well. It is only really used in the heaviest emotional moments and the reaction therein. So you can see how something really hits any one of the cast members when someone lashes out or says something that's just crossing the line a bit too much.
Yeah. And then, there's some big themes in here. Obviously, we have regrets, we have fears, we have, isolation and loneliness and that kind of thing. But I think the biggest one that I was really getting in this movie, well, I mean, to be fair, the regrets and the longing for the past was definitely the other big one, but this idea of blame and everyone gets a turn of being the one to blame for everyone else's problems constantly. It's probably mostly the parents, because it makes sense to blame the parents because they came first and they raised the other two. But even the brothers do get their share of it, especially the older brother, because he's the older brother and he was kind of also helping raise his younger brother, kind of thing.
It feels like this is I've been around families like this, not nearly as explosive and definitely not as eloquent as this, but this idea of this explosive sort, everything is done at an 11. It doesn't feel like there is this sort of chill, let's just talk about things. It's always looking for this level of, you mean something much more insidious in this banal statement that you make. And I every time I think about that stuff, it really does come back to the idea of usually one of the parents or both of the parents are some level of narcissistic. Usually it's some level where they raise their kids with this idea of you have to act a certain way, be a certain way. But even when you act correctly or whatever, the parent is still going to be chastising you and looking in on that. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And when we say the kids in this movie, the brothers, like one is in his, seems to be mid to late 30s. The other one is somewhere in his 20s. Like they're not children, but they are still living at home with their parents in this case. And they are able to go to bat. They are able to like stand up for themselves and like have these screaming matches with their own parents. And it's something that is not something I was ever around, because this was something I was more around like my childhood. I try not to associate with these people in my adulthood, but so be it.
I mean, they specifically point out the older brother's 34 or almost 34. They say that in the opening scene. So when we say kids, all we mean is that they're their kids, not that they're literally kids. I think, I mean, the character building's obviously solid. Like, there's clearly a good sense of who these 4 characters are, and it's clearly hinting at certain things that it reveals more of as the movie goes on. I might even debate that by the time I got to the third hour, I was kind of thinking, I feel like you've beat some of these things a bit much by this point, where I don't really need it to be Like, it feels we've already explored this idea, but we're still doing the monologues about this one particular thing, or this one particular thing over here. So I don't want to sound too negative, because I actually think it's really high quality, generally speaking, and it's got a high enough rating on all the sites, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, and I understand why. But it is 3 hours, and I don't know if I would want to sit through it again. And it's funny because obviously 12 Angry Men is this movie set in one room, and it's just 12 people talking. But that movie's like 90 minutes long. It's so tight, and I think it's also based on a play, funnily enough. But whether it was because it was adapted to a screenplay better, or whether it was just because it was a tighter story in general, so Sidney Lumet was able to just go in and like just direct the hell out of it. Either way, that movie is basically perfect. It's perfect in every such way. And I think if they had trimmed this down and condensed some of the things so there wasn't as much repetition down to sub 2 hours, I could see this being special, because it would have the tight storytelling that we'd want from it, and you'd keep all the things that are good about it. You'd keep the good direction, you'd keep the good acting, you still keep the really fleshed out characters, because I don't think trimming this down to 2 hours would remove any of that depth of the characters. I don't think it would, because everything I'm thinking you cut is repetition. Now, I don't actually have literal suggestions for you, because I feel like I'd have to go through it with like notes and a fine-tooth comb, and like, it would take a lot of work. And I'm not saying that we're being lazy. I think they were just wanting to be faithful and not change anything, because, hey, we're going to just take this straight up and just do it on the screen. But it is kind of a detriment, because at that point, you're just putting a play on film. And at a certain point, films are written to be film, and so when you're adapting, you do have to adapt. It is a different medium, and to be fair, it turns out much better than I think it should. It actually is still very, very overall pretty dependable. It still works far better than it probably should. And the fact that the one sort of big complaint we have is really only the crack that is there because they didn't like adapt it in like a more kind of like, transformative process, is actually kind of a compliment. But it is still there, and it is still something to notice, and it is maybe the one big thing that kind of is going to knock it down a couple of points, I think, by the end of this review.
I will say that's not. I get what you're saying, that being too faithful here is kind of at a detriment, and I agree. But I think that it is not an overall overarching thing, because one of my favorite film adaptations of a play was Kenneth Branagh's adaptation of Hamlet. I think that one, it was a 1-for-1. He did not cut any dialogue. He didn't do anything. He did change the setting. He said it later on down the line of time-wise, but it's 4 hours long. It's ridiculously crazy long in terms of a movie. But I think when it was adapted, it was done with the mindset of, we have to make some changes to what would be a play to make it more adaptable for the film. And I think that that's kind of where this movie lost me a little bit, is that so much of it does feel like a stage play. So much of it does feel like characters are just sitting around a table talking, and there isn't as much visual interest. There isn't as much crazy like stuff to keep you engaged in the visual medium. That's what's kind of pulling me out, and why I think it feels so long in its own right, is that for a play that works, for a movie, you need something just a little bit more, unless you're going like full art piece with it, which I don't think they were here. I think it just feels like they were shooting the play like as if it were on stage, and didn't really think that much about how to visually pump it up or change things for a film medium.
I mean, I think that last part's a little bit harsh. I think they did think about it. I think they chose to be reserved. I don't think this is a result of poor skill. I think this, almost every fault about this is like an intentional choice for one reason or another that we obviously just disagree with. But it's, I don't think it's oh, whoops-a-daisy kind of thing.
Oh no, we made a boring film. How did that happen?
Yeah. That said, though, I would happily watch this again than a 4-hour Hamlet. F that. That sounds like my worst nightmare.
I just really liked it. I don't know. I've always had a soft spot for that particular adaptation. Then again, I haven't watched it in probably about 10 years now, so I may need to go back and revisit that. My other thing that I wanted to say about it, though, is that maybe this is just me, as the movie progresses, as we move through the acts, it feels like the characters are becoming more open with each other. It feels like everyone is being more raw. However, I don't feel like the energy is constantly building. Like this depth to the characters is constantly ratcheting up. It's constantly getting more and more open with them. But in terms of the energy, I feel like all the explosive stuff we have in the third act, fourth act is exactly equal to, if not less than, that in the first and second act. And that does kind of lead to an emotional flatlining as well, where you hit the ending and it doesn't feel like a big climax. It feels like just the same as it was the whole way through.
My favorite moment is in the first act. So I guess there's some truth to that. I think the visuals of the ending told me it was the ending. I'm like, oh, this is ending now, because this visual is clearly supposed to be the ending.
Right.
But I kind of agree that it didn't feel like it was... It kind of built to this punch, if you will, that it was kind of going for. So, you know, I mean, this is a tough one, because I feel like, you know, this is beloved and praised by many a critic, and we're being a little bit more down on it, even though I do think it's very high quality in a lot of ways. Oh, yeah.
If we were just to sit here and talk about the acting, I'd have nothing bad to say the entire time. Like, it's a tour de force in terms of acting. Everything just comes down to how it was presented in the structure and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the thing, though, because what I would make very clear, it's not that it's bad filmmaking, because the filmmaking and direction is actually excellent. This is a very interesting case where the only real flaw that has resulted in some of these feelings of it being repetitive or not building perhaps correctly is that it just wasn't adapted into a screenplay that made, you know, decisions to make it work for what a movie's supposed to work. And I think when we say that, you're saying, well, the filmmaking's not good. No. The filmmaking from like a directorial visual standpoint is all on point. It's really just that one element of like structuring it to work as a movie. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
So, hey, so we'll probably get to spoilers because we can't really talk too much about what the characters open up about until we do. So, we'll get into it. There's not really any kind of score to speak of, music wise.
Yeah, I think it only really happens during the interstitials between acts. I think that's where a little bit comes in, but it's very light and it's not something that's present throughout.
No. Which again, very play-like actually, because, you know, typically there's some music for the transitions where you go for your piss break, but not during all the actual performance. So again, kind of fits in with that vibe. So I think we will say spoilers and get into it. So spoilers from this point on for a Long Day's Journey into Night. So, you know, I do kind of really appreciate, one of the things I like about the movie is that it's right at the start when it's kind of morning and they're all kind of catching up and like sort of like saying how their night was, and husband was snoring, so Mary went to another room, and there's some reactions to that for reasons we'll get into, but like it feels like everything is like almost pretending we're a normal family and we're not going to have any trouble. But there's the odd little comment from, say, James the dad, which is like, just you wait till we get to night and like this and this and this. And I'm like, yeah, they basically know that as they drink alcohol throughout the day or any other substances that might get taken, that by the end, everything's going to be unleashed. And it's not going to necessarily be a big fight per se, but certainly it's not going to be this civil pretense that we're all keeping up in the morning. And not that there's not little bursts in the morning, because there is little moments where James gets a little bit argumentative with his dad, but it calms down relatively quite easily compared to what's happening once we get into Act 4, and like he's drunkenly yelling repeatedly at both him and his brother and everything else. So I like that detail.
Yeah. No, it does it. I think the exposition of the characters here, you get a good idea as to how it feels like they're all pretending everything is okay. There's even a moment where I think Mary is like fiddling with Edmund's collar, like she's just doing something there, and both of the other two characters, the father and the other brother, are just like watching with like suspicion, and you get the feeling something isn't right, something's going wrong here, and that feeling of that underlying tension and how it's just waiting to bubble up is almost immediately shown to us, where, like you said, I think the father lashes out at one of the brothers for saying something, and it's only from that point on that it starts breaking it down into like these smaller pairings where you get like I think the father and the older brother at first, and then you get some other matches there. But
well, I think it flips to the mother and the younger son next. Like I think it literally just flips to the other two characters. I think the thing with Mary is right at the start, her whole thing is, oh, let's not talk about negative things. Let's talk about nice things because we're a nice family. Like she's kind of in this weird denial like phase where we only have to talk about things that are proper, and anything else is, oh, why would you bring up such sordid business? Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that we're going to have a nice lunch together, blah 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 blah, and that's very much, and she's talking about how, oh, I'm trying to get my hair right and it keeps, there's something wrong with it. I really like all that stuff, and there's like little allusions to things early on. Now they openly talk about the fact that there's something possibly wrong with Edmund, the younger brother, that he might be sick and it's maybe more than a cold. But the dad does grill out Jamie for bringing it up in front of the mum, Mary, because that'll upset her. Why are you bringing that up in front of her? That's kind of the first real conflict that arises in the movie. And I actually got a little bit confused there because they mentioned that it might be consumption, and I didn't know what that meant, and it sounded like alcoholism to me based on the word.
Okay. Because
you consume alcohol. But then a couple other lines, like maybe like 5 minutes later, it was like, no, this sounds like something he's caught. This doesn't sound like an addiction problem. So I just quick Google. Oh, it's TB. Okay, right.
Yeah.
There we go. Done. Which I guess
I can't remember where I first saw that from, but I definitely had that same thing happen before, where I was like, what the hell's consumption? And then all of a sudden they start coughing up blood. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why it's still set in like 1912, which is when it's supposed to be set. Although I did question it because I wasn't really thinking about that at one point, because they've got lights in the house, electric lights. Now, not that I was under the impression electric lights didn't exist yet in 1912. I know they did, but because the dad's always complaining that he's worried about saving money, it makes me think that he's well off. And I'm like, and the lights being there's like, yeah, in 1912, like I feel like having electric lights is a fairly, like, poor people didn't have electric lights yet, I assume.
Yeah.
That was at least a middle class thing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that we slowly get about his character, is that he was a former famous actor or something like that, some stage actor, and he had a lot of wealth. He was pretty well off, but then he kept on investing in property or whatever, and he just keeps on buying up parcels of land, despite the fact that they have like zero liquid assets right now, and they're kind of just staring down the barrel of financial hardship.
Well, that's only part of the story, though. I feel like we only ever hear that really from the sons, and they may be overblowing it, to be honest, because it also sounds like because he grew up poor, which he gets into later, that he's just a penny pincher. He's just miserable with money, and is constantly saying, the value of the dollar, blah, 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 the value of the dollar this, value of the dollar that. He's just constantly doing that stuff. So anyway, main plot line number one. Edmund is sick and he's seeing the doctor in the afternoon. Might be TB, consumption.
Yes.
Point number two, which they're very cagey about saying exactly what it is, but they're kind of talking about, the mum's, going off to this room on her own. That means she might be doing something again. And you're like, what are they talking about? What's this? What's going on here? Very quickly, it does become clear they're talking about some kind of addiction. We find out much later in the movie, of course, exactly what it is. It's morphine. But my favorite, because a lot of this first chunk of the movie is, especially once we get to the one-on-one between Edmund and her, is she's kind of getting in and out of like being normal and kind of freaking out. But one of the big things that she keeps making little passive-aggressive comments about is that, you three keep making sure one of you's here to spy on me. You don't trust me. How am I supposed to feel like, I'm like a person if I'm always being like spied on, so on and so on. And it really sets up this idea that, they're all worried about her. They're all thinking she might be back on the morphine. And he lets her go up for a nap, which the others freak out about when they find out he let her go for a nap. And my favorite moment in the entire movie is when she comes downstairs and she's like, comes over and she starts hugging Edmund, who's sitting down from behind. And Jamie is standing in the background and he's framed just kind of perfectly on the other side of the shot. And the entire time she's being all loving with Edmund in the foreground, you just see him staring at her. and with this really sad look in his face where he can tell, he just knows his mother's high right now. And
yeah,
I love that moment. And then eventually the camera like tracks in on his face for a close-up, but it's not for a while. We let it play out for a good couple minutes. Well, not a couple minutes, but like a good minute as this is happening. And he's just standing there reacting to it, looking like his soul's been crushed. Like he's like, oh no, we failed her. We've let her do this again. And then we get a similar kind of reaction from the dad when he comes back into the scene, where it literally takes like one look at her and like maybe one sentence out of her mouth for him to just give this same stare and look at her like, oh no, this has started again.
Yeah, there's one thing that I think the close-ups do very well here in taking advantage of is they specifically make mention of her eyes. And from what I see online and from what I even got from the movie here is that when you have this morphine, your pupils become very constricted. They're very small comparatively. So when they zoom into shots of her, you can see how her eyes are like little pinpricks, like super tiny circles. And then they'll cut it off with another character. They'll show someone else, like the father. And, he's got normal sized pupils, very wide, very whatever for the light reasons. And it makes it, even without you realizing what you're looking at there, you subtly pick up on these little differences where she feels just a bit more manic because of that, a bit more out of touch with all of this.
Yeah, but notably, she also feels a lot more like happier, at least for a little bit. Obviously, she does start to go back and forth again, but
oh my God, that back and forth, like that's what stuck with me. I've never had someone in my family like that, but I have seen other people where it is just that constant like pendulum of like, and now we're like talking about good things, and then I say something that upsets me and we sit on the bad things, and then let's not talk about that anymore, let's go back to the good things.
Yes, we shouldn't talk about that, so let's talk about these other things, blah blah blah.
Yep.
I mean, I think this stuff was my favorite part of the movie, because it was like, it felt like here in this first act it introduced some things by teasing them. And then we had this moment where they all reacted to the fact that they could tell she was using again. And I thought that was going to be more of a focus of the rest of the movie, was them trying to deal with her. And it kind of doesn't really do that. It we just sort of hover around the house and we see how the rest of the day plays out, as opposed to them having more of a, it's not like I was expecting a big plot per se, but I thought there might be a sort of general idea of they want to try and talk to her or give her a, what do you call it?
Intervention.
Intervention, thank you. I can't want to say intermission, but no, that's a plaything. Intervention. And I thought, like there's a sort of general goal that they're going to try and broach softly through conversation, through the scenes kind of thing. And it never quite does that, which I thought was a shame, because I thought that was, and again, I'm critiquing the original story here, I guess, but I thought that was going to give it a sense of focus for the rest of the movie, because I really liked how they set that up. I loved the reactions to it. It felt like a good turning point. It felt like that sort of end of Act 1, oh shit's been set up now, like this is now, and I care about the fact that they're all concerned. I love that they've been all bickering to each other, but they all react to this the same way. They all look concerned, and it's like, oh, they are a family, because they all give a shit, and they all want to like help her. So as all this was working for me really quite well in that first act.
Yeah, I think I do like it, but like you were saying, it feels like that's going to be the focus, and it ends up like halfway.
Just one quick correction. This is actually the second act. This is after the time skip. Yeah, because I mean, just Edmund goes for a walk. Yeah, and then comes back. Yeah, but it's almost lunchtime when this all happens.
Yes. It does feel like it's going to be the focus, but there was something I remember reading in like a writing class or something like that, where whenever it's talking about movies, screenplays, stuff like that, the idea is your story should always be the most interesting day of that person's life. Because if it's not, then why aren't you talking about that person, like that day? That would be the thing you should talk about. And I feel like this story, for Edmund, for reasons we'll get to with the cough and the consumption and all that, it's his most interesting day. But for the rest of the family, I feel like it's specifically pointing out that this is just a normal day. This isn't anything out of the ordinary for any of them. This is just an average day for what's going on. And I don't think that that's unintentional. I think that they specifically did that. Like I said, the writer, this is very reflective of his home life. This is something that he very specifically was trying to get across. So I understand intentionally choosing that, but it does buck the trend of you expect the idea that she's back on morphine, that they're catching her doing this stuff, to be this central focus that everyone's now going to focus on. When in reality, they're like, same as it ever was, and we just have to keep going.
Yeah, I have no problem with this not being the most important day in this family's life. Like, if anything, I still kind of expected the ending that we got, even at this point. Like, I expected it to end kind of on a downer where, like, oh, they're just all kind of sad because she really is off the deep end kind of thing. And that's effectively how it ends. And I'm fine with that being where it ends up. I just thought there'd be a little bit more of them trying to, like, affect her, try and affect some change, but failing. And it's like, well, we'll try again tomorrow because we're still a family kind of thing.
Yeah. I feel exactly the same. I go into this, I'm expecting a tragedy. I don't expect this to be a thing where it comes out the end and they're saying like, oh, it turns out the tuberculosis was actually just a popcorn stuck in your throat. Everything's fine, no problem. Like, I know this is going to end badly, but I did expect there to be more of something that made this day special, more of something that made it where, like you said, they try to maybe do an intervention. Maybe they have this big falling out. Like maybe she goes and she does some big sweeping thing of like, oh, here's why it matters to me. And like, I can't do any of that stuff or whatever. But it does just feel like this is the same as yesterday and it will be the same as tomorrow. And nothing is really out of the ordinary with this particular day.
I mean, I guess it may be a bit more heightened than it sometimes does. I feel like this is a more heightened day than it was yesterday, but other than that, yeah, not like, you know, particularly special. I will say, like, one of my favorite visuals of the movie is later on, they sort of do this idea where they're kind of avoiding her because now they just don't want to deal with her because she's like, you know, it'll just make them sad, although it's difficult to deal with her. So there's a great moment where we're in Act 4 where it's a younger son Edmund and the dad James. And there's just a couple of moments where they think they hear a noise of her coming down the stairs. She doesn't, but they look over to the stairs and the shot comes from behind the banister on the stairs. And this banister's very specifically got these, you know, it's quite tall and there's big long beams in each, you know, going all the way up it. It looks like a prison cell. And it makes them look like they're in a jail cell, like they're trapped, like scared that they're going to have to deal with their wife/mother if she comes down here. And this idea that once you're in a family, as much as it's supposed to be loving, sometimes you feel trapped with them. I thought that was a very distinct visual they chose, you know?
It reuses that several times. I think it's somewhere in the second act where she's talking to her husband and she's talking to like, oh, yes, I'm going to have to go into town to the drugstore or whatever. And he calls her out saying like, we all know why you're going to the drugstore. Stop doing whatever. But when they are moving back inside the house to talk, there's an open door that has like a little drape on the inside. It's like a lace drape, and it's specifically like a crisscross pattern, and she's behind that to give the idea of she feels trapped here. And even in the dialogue, she says that. She says how much she feels like they go out, they're able to go do things, but she's kind of stuck here at home, and people view her as so fragile and broken now at this point that she's unable to do anything on her own.
Yeah, honestly, because it is so much conversation stuff, like that's really what almost 95% of the movie is, that it really isn't one we can go through scene by scene in the way we normally do. One, because like trying to remember everything they actually say would be you know, a nightmare given how long it is and how much, and they are talking a lot. There's not a lot of silence in this movie. Like they are constantly firing dialogue at each other. So I think what makes more sense is to talk about the central things that they're all kind of like hovering around, because they kind of like broach certain topics early on and they get developed as time goes on. So for example, just to start with Mary, the mother, right? Yeah, she's got a morphine addiction, and as we get hints of in Act 2 where that morphine addiction came from, it's when she gave birth to Edmund, she was in great pain, and the cheap doctor because the dad's a cheapskate and even goes to cheap doctors, just shot her up with morphine for the pain. Like that was his solution, and that started her down this path of addiction. So that's one big thing we find out there. We also find out that they had a third son in between the two kids that they lost when he was just a baby, and she basically goes on a couple of monologues in this movie about how she basically felt guilty for having another one and that God would strike her down and things like that. She goes into this whole thing, and this idea of like, because part of what I was saying earlier is that everyone gets blamed for something, and it's like, well, it makes sense that the kids can blame their parents for how messed up they are. It makes sense that the younger brother could blame the older brother for some stuff. How does anyone blame the youngest? Well, your birth gave her a morphine addiction, and we all kind of blame you for that in some way or another.
Yeah.
Like, that's what they blame him for.
I also love, you just offhandedly mentioned there the baby who died, and it's not even something like they come back to. It's just this implicit underlying thing. They say it once and they never have to bring it up again, where the whole reason the baby died was because the older son, when the parents were off doing acting or whatever, the older son and the baby were left behind with a caretaker, and the older son had measles, went into the baby's room, and the baby died of measles. So they have this just low-lying, what is the word I'm looking for? Not distrust, but like they view the older son as such a screw up and such this like completely worthless sack because he was the reason. They blame him for the younger son dying at such a young age.
And then that's extended out to the fact that the father's disappointed that he's not more successful, that he's never really quite found like his way in life, what his job's going to be. He always ends up back with he leaves for a while every so often, but always ends up back at their house. And that kind of plays out in the rest of the movie, where when the father gives Edmund a like $10 bill, which in 1912, pretty hefty, one would assume.
He said, they're like, wow, Dad, you gave me 10 whole dollars. I'm going to go out in the town. I'm going to see the lights.
Well, that's the thing. He gives it to Jamie. Well, he takes what he needs for travel, because that's why he was asking for money to go to the doctors. And Jamie takes the rest, goes and gets drunk, and he specifically points out that seeing a prostitute at the brothel costs $2. $2 whole.
In fairness, he points out it's not a very popular prostitute at this brothel, so maybe normal ones cost $3.
I don't know. The implication I got is he paid his $2 and he got to pick like which lady he wanted, and he was feeling so down about himself. He's like, you know what? I only deserve Fat Yvonne or whatever her name was.
Yeah.
So yeah, like anyway, that's like one thread of it. So it's like, okay, so people blame younger brother for all the things that he's caused just by living, and then people blame the older brother for the death of the middle child, and also the fact that he's not some more successful person who could, because the dad at one point later on is like, oh, I was expecting you to be my heir, to be the one to take on the family name and be the legacy, my firstborn, all that nonsense.
But that's also, that gets to the parents to the brothers, but I also like that there's this implicit thing where, because the older one is viewed as the screw up, because he's viewed as the guy who killed the baby in the crib, when the younger one is not as much of a failure as he is. Obviously he has some issues in his own stuff of like getting and keeping a job, but then he gets sick and he's viewed with this fragileness. He's viewed with this idea, like there's multiple points during the fourth act where the father is like just ranting and raving, going whatever, and then Edmund starts coughing, and he immediately is just like, all right, well, we can calm down. We don't have to do all this stuff right now. I feel like then in the fourth act we get that conversation between the brothers where the older brother's basically like, why should you have it so good? I've been personally going out and trying to ruin your life, not through any means of like doing anything, but just giving you bad advice or whatever, so that you end up more like me, so I'm not viewed as so much of the screw up. And so you even get that level of like not anger, but whatever it is this again, I don't even know what the word is, but it's something where they're a bit more neutral towards each other than you would think normal brothers should be, despite the fact that it seems like they're kind enough to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think the brothers on paper seem like they have a healthier relationship, even though there is some underlying things that are definitely there. One of the things that gets brought up is that Edmund didn't know about the mother's addiction until he was already like age 20 or something like that, because the older brother points out is, hey, I knew that she had this problem for 10 years before you did, because we hid it from you, because we didn't want you to know. We wanted you to be sheltered from it. And she's been to rehab and back. They don't call it that, but that's what they're saying. She's been to rehab and back, and and the dad complains like, "Hey, I've spent all this money on trying to cure her, trying to fix her, and she always starts again. It's all just been money down the drain. I'm going to end up poor because that woman just keeps doing this." And then, "Oh, that's your fault, Edmund, because you made her do this." And to get back round to the mother, actually, because there's a lot of her backstory she brings up, and this gets into the whole regrets thing, where she starts talking about, who she was before she met James, right? This was like 36 years ago, which, I guess makes sense because they're together for 2 years before Jamie's born. That sounds about right. But she talks about how she was in a convent and she was a pianist, and she dreamed both of being a concert pianist, but also she considered becoming a nun. And these were all the plans she had, but all of it went out the window because when she met the actor who was traveling with his play, James, she fell in love instantly. And all she wanted from that point on was to be a wife. And, well, that's clearly what she wanted at the time. Clearly now she's looking back at it and being like, "Oh, like, you invaded my life and everything I thought I wanted, I just let go. And now I'm wondering, like, can I even play the piano anymore? My hands are old and, like, I've not played in such a long time. Can I even do that?" And she also keeps commenting that she's gotten fat. She doesn't look fat at all, of course. I believe one of the symptoms of being on morphine is that you get very skinny, and that's why she seems like to her she's fatter because she's not been shooting up for a while. So she's put on a normal amount of weight, not an unhealthy amount of weight.
Yeah, I think we failed to mention, and it's not that big of a deal, but the big thing that's kind of the thing that breaks the peace of the first act scene is them mentioning that she went down to the guest room and didn't sleep in the room with her dad or their dad, and she's basically saying, "Oh, it's because he was snoring. That's the whole reason why." But like we said, there's an underlying tension where everybody knows that means she was sneaking off to do something. Like, that's where that's all coming from.
Possibly. Do I think the sadness of the story is, though, is I don't think she did, but I think the fact that everyone thought that's what made her want to go back to it. I think that's the tragedy of it, is that I think she was actually telling the truth when she said he was snoring and she just went to sleep in the other bedroom. And because they all gave her this look, "Where are you on this again?" that made her feel so much pressure that she's went and running back to the drugs. So there's a tragic element there, which inherently makes it all their fault that she's using again. Which
well, again, that all comes back to the idea of blame. Like, there's something to be said here that I really appreciate, where they openly blame these other characters. It's not something where it is this kind of quiet, simmering hatred. Like, they openly come out and say it, but then the other character gives their response. They give their justification for it. For instance, there's the idea of the father is accusing the older son of, like, corrupting the younger one, of saying, like, "Oh, it's your fault that he isn't able to get as good of a job or whatever. You've corrupted him in that way." And the brother basically straight up says, like, "I didn't do anything until he was already showing that kind of stuff. And at that point, I'm just trying to be his friend. I'm just trying to be buddies with him. Like, I have done nothing wrong here." And that just keeps coming back over and over again, is this idea of a character will blame the other, and then the other character will say, "Well, I didn't do anything wrong because of X, Y, and Z." And neither side is inherently right or wrong. There is shades of gray there where they could have done better, but they aren't expected to shoulder the entirety of the blame here either. And that's for every single issue in this entire movie, no matter what it is, whether it's the father's cheapness, whether it's the son getting sick, any of that sort of stuff. It all is blame spread around, but justifiable through the lens of how deep these characters end up being defined.
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea of looking to the past, because the movie like ends with the mum finally comes downstairs, and at that point she's completely gone, almost like she thinks she's back in the past, where she's saying, "Oh, I need to practice my piano for nun so and so because she'll be disappointed if I'm not playing," and she's carrying. Like
my fingers are all hurting and whatnot. Yeah. I need to go down to the nurse's office, pretty much.
And she's carrying her old wedding dress because she was talking about that earlier. She's like, "Oh, I found this wedding gown in a box in the attic, and I don't know why I wanted it, but I've got it here." And she starts monologuing herself. And this is actually only like maybe half an hour after the dad was monologuing to the younger son about his backstory, about how he was an actor and he ended up being so successful with this one play that he bought the play, he went on tour, he made a lot of money, But by the time he realized, oh, I don't want to just do this one thing for the rest of my life. I want to, act. I want to be other roles. But when he tried to, one, like, his creative spark had kind of like been long gone, and he didn't know how to act as a different role because he'd been just regurgitating the same lines over and over the whole time, which kind of sounds like a bit of a metaphor for being in this family and saying the same thing over and over again. But also just this idea that, like, he'd gotten too comfortable with it, and no one wanted this from him. Everyone just wants him to play the role they know him as. They want him to be, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, you must be Pee-wee. You're not allowed to be anything else. No one cares if you're anyone else. You have to be Pee-wee. And that's kind of like how he felt.
I'd love to see the West End production of this with Paul Rubens as the father character. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. And it's also worth mentioning, it might not be as bad as the morphine addiction, but, like, the rest of them might be alcoholics. Like that, like, as much as I said, I thought that earlier, but they're like, there's a running thing in this movie of, like, the brothers wanting to sneak a little bit of the dad's booze, not because they're too young to drink. It's not like that. It's just that no, he'll be mad because we stole some of his booze because he keeps track of how much he's got.
Well, that's the part that comes back over and over again, is that the mother takes the booze, like the chef, well, housemaid, whatever you want to call her, she takes some of it. Like, everyone takes some of this booze, and by the time the father finally gets around to it, they've been refilling it back up with water each and every time. Yes. So finally, when he gets a drink of it, he's like, what the hell is this? Who's been taking my booze? This is like 90% water now at this point. And I really like that, just also as the metaphor, the idea that, like, technically, if you look at the bottle, it is, on the outside, it looks like the same thing as it always was. But inside, things have been so slowly eroded and changed that it's nothing at all of what it could have been before.
I think that's the other thing, this movie, because in the same way that when I was saying it starts off with them pretending to be a normal family, even though they all know it's probably going to go all up in flames by the end of the night, is that it made, like, this idea of the external view of them, when you're talking about the bottle, is that most families love to hide that they've got problems. They don't want to air it in front of other people, other families. They want to present themselves as a happy household unit. And I feel like, that takes a lot of effort. Like, all the pretending takes a lot of energy to try and maintain that image, because you have to, hold back a comment when you want to say something. You have to hold back your anger. You have to smile. You have to fake a smile. You have to do all these things. And it's all kind of a charade. And I think the idea that they start off with, like, they literally start their days with the charade of, we're okay. We're just a family. We have fights. It's no big deal. But they know, like, your older brother's going to go and get drunk and go to the whorehouse again, because he always does it, that pathetic layabout loser. Like, he's useless. Your mother's going to be off the deep end by the end of the night and be like a zombie and not know where she is. And that happens. Like, all these things happen. And then you've got this idea that she also lost a child, and now her youngest child, he's an adult now, but he might die because of this, because we're pre-vaccine for this particular illness. So, I think this sense of, like, keeping up the appearance and the pressure to do that is maybe, like, the biggest thing this movie's condemning, is that instead of actually just exploring, like, even though they kind of get a lot of these things out, no one actually sort of tries to do anything with it. They all just kind of keep getting emotional and yelling, and then calming back down. Emotional, yelling, calming back down.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with the blame game. The idea of it is, if it's never your fault, if it's never something that you did, then you never have to change. If you can always shunt this off onto someone else, then they're the ones who are responsible for it. They're the ones who need to do something about it. And so you get this family who's just constantly telling each other that they're the problem, they're the ones who are doing this, and they'll get upset about it, but nobody will ever actually do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, even the wife at one point later on says, oh, you would come back, or I'd be waiting for you in a hotel room, because I'd be touring with you in the play, then the kids would be there, and you'd be carried back to the door by your colleagues because you'd gotten so drunk. And it's like, hey, there was something bubbling even back in those early days. Even though when she talks about falling in love with them, it's this happy memory. The first time she brings it up to him, it's this happy thing to reminisce about. But it doesn't last for long before they start talking about the negative parts of it and where things start to go wrong, and the sad memories that they can't help but fixate on. So, and maybe that's why this day is particularly notable, though, is because the idea of finding out that their son might have a terminal illness is maybe bringing up the memories of this other child that they lost, and that maybe is, fueling her descent a bit more than it in a usual day.
Yeah, it definitely feels more emotionally heightened whenever they talk about the TB stuff. Like, absolutely, that's something that is special about today. But again, by the time we hit the end of the movie, it doesn't feel like anyone is even talking about that. It doesn't feel like that's even a thing that's mattering right now. That's kind of just the background noise where they're using that to get emotionally charged enough to air the rest of their grievances, to talk about everything else that's been bothering them about each other.
Yeah, in fact, Edmund kind of avoids telling the mother a little bit what the doctor's visit said, right? Because we find out he's got the consumption, and he's going to have to go to some kind of rehab place to hopefully get better, right?
It's a sanatorium, which is basically just a hospital, but like you are absolutely blocked off from being around anybody else until your TB passes.
But the dad's like, I've been assured you'll be fine in 6 months, maybe a year tops, but you'll be completely cured. And he's kind of hand waving it, and he's even accused by the big brother at one point. Oh, you're thinking, well, why spend? You think he's going to die, so why bother spending that much money and trying to save him? Just be as cheap as possible. And he gets offended at that, to the point where when he does talk to the younger brother about it, he kind of eventually offers, hey, you don't have to go to this cheap place. You can go wherever you want, within reason. But you can go wherever you want.
Within reason. And even when the younger brother's recounting that to the older brother later on, and he quotes it back exactly as the dad say it. So you know that this is something that just is a constant in their life, where it's like, oh, of course, we can go out and buy that car. I mean, within reason. Absolutely, within reason.
Yeah, it feels like a running thing where he gets called out for his cheapness, and he feels offended, especially when it gets tied to something as serious as this, where he's basically been told, you don't love me enough to spend money on me. And he's like, of course I do. I'll spend as much as I can on you.
Right.
But would he have done had he not been called out on it? I mean, I guess that's the other thing here. That I wouldn't say it's a theme of the movie, but certainly with the dad character, it feels like one of the things that it's doing a lot of is the idea that I think he legitimately has convinced himself of that he's in the right with a lot of these things. Like, is this like justification? He's able to keep saying, no, this doctor's fine because of this and this, and he brought in a specialist, and this is all fine. Like, he's very good at saying this is like just pretending that he's not being cheap and justifying it and saying it's the right thing to do.
Well, that's the way that he justifies it. The way that he says that why he's not being cheap is that he tells everybody whenever he's asking for anything, he always says, "Get me the best. Like, I want the best. This, I want this, that, the other thing." But in between every sentence, he talks about how close they are to the poorhouse, how he's hemorrhaging money. He's doing all this stuff. And he never says, get me the cheapest doctor. He'll say, get me the best doctor you can, but don't you try to scam me out of extra money or anything like that. I know that, we're if I have to make one more extra payment on whatever, then I'm not going to be able to afford anything. But I want the best doctor. But all that other stuff, keep in mind.
Yeah. Which again makes me think there's a little bit of a stretching of the truth here. Like, I feel like he plays that up because he wants to be cheap.
Yeah, probably. I mean, like you said, they've got electricity, they've got the house. And looking, I've had up here in front of me the actual family history between them. Apparently, his actual father, the writer, who, by the way, the child who died in the crib of measles, that was Eugene. That was the author. He just didn't want to put himself in his own story here.
Interesting.
The father was an actor, and his whole thing was that he did the Count of Monte Cristo, and he did that role like 6,000 times, and he tried to get out of it. He tried to do other roles. Nothing was really working, but that was the only thing that was bringing in like actual money. But he did get commercial success at the expense of his artistic merits. He managed to give up his ideas of being able to do other things because of it. So yeah, he probably wasn't hurting for money, all things considered, but it is an issue of, I think he felt that could all disappear in a moment. That if as soon as the people stop wanting him in the Count of Monte Cristo, that's it. They're done.
Well, to go back a second though to the whole he got money at the expense of his artistic pursuits. I think that's a running thing throughout multiple characters, because the wife kind of has that with the wanting to be the pianist, and then that kind of going away because she became a wife and a mother. And I think the younger son, you know, they kind of point out that he does read a lot of literature. He reads a lot of different types of things, and they call him very highbrow, and he clearly cares about that kind of thing. But he's not been able to make any money off of it. So there's definitely this idea of like, even the artist in the family who was able to make money, technically doing what they wanted to do, felt trapped in the one thing, and he couldn't explore all the other things he wanted to do. I guess it's kind of like in the same way that, I mean, forget the artistic part of it, but even like the wife, like wanting to become a wife, like falling in love with this man, wanting to be that, but then not realizing all the negative parts that would also bring, which is the being the trapped in the family, having these tragedies to go through, and then still being stuck with them decades later. Because I suspect divorce was a bit more rare in 1912.
Well, even if it wasn't rare at that time, they go through the motions of saying very specifically, these are Irish Catholics.
Yes.
And if divorce is rare in general, it is non-existent in the Irish Catholics.
Well, I will say that the dad is definitely Irish Catholic. They bring that up. It does kind of feel that the sons are kind of a little against it, you know, they're kind of prodding at him a little bit, and you know, because the dad, when we bring up the young son's books, the dad's like picking them up and going, this is a filthy atheist, this one, and this one's this, and this one's that. Like, you know, he starts giving it all his opinions about it.
I think he specifically says, like, you're the only man I know who's absolutely convinced that Shakespeare is an Irish Catholic because nobody else would be good enough to write those plays. And it's like, yes, and he absolutely was. What about it?
Same about the guy who beat Napoleon. I don't remember who said, but he's like, yeah, you think he's an Irish Catholic. He's like, I didn't say he was a good one, but he was Catholic.
Yeah, but no, they call out the dad at one point saying like, yeah, well, we haven't really seen you go to church at all. And he's like, yeah, okay, fine. I'm not a good Catholic, but I am still Irish Catholic. Like, I don't have to like go to church for me to believe in that sort of stuff. So I think that is kind of a thing within the character where obviously he's not passing this belief and religion onto his kids, because his kids view him with such disdain anyway that it's not like they would take it from him if he was trying to pass it on to him. But even within that, he's kind of lost so much faith in himself. And that's another thing that comes up, loss of faith. That's a big theme here as well. But he's lost so much faith in himself that I don't think he has a faith in the higher power there either way.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they've all, like, cause I mean, the older brother keeps being accused of being ultra cynical, and the dad keeps saying, "Oh, you always jump to the worst possible conclusion. It must be the worst thing," because he's being a bit more optimistic about the wife being back on drugs to begin with. Obviously, he changes his tune very quickly because he can recognize the signs, but every time something comes up where the brother like jumps to, "Oh, this means this, and you know, this bad thing is going to happen," or whatever, you know, because the father sometimes says, or even the son, the younger son sometimes like says, "Oh, like, but she's just went back on it, so there's a chance you can kick it because she just started again," as if that really matters to an addict, that they just took their first hit. Like, no, like once they've fallen off the wagon, they've fallen off the wagon. There's no.
Yeah, well, that's during the fourth act, right as she's coming down the stairs, the older brother makes some comment, I think, about Ophelia, which goes back to myth or whatever. But as soon as he says it, some snarky little snide comment about the mom, the younger brother just slaps him, and the father's like, "Yeah, do it again." Like, he deserves it. He's been a prick this whole time, and the son recognizes it. He's like, "Yeah, all right, fair enough. I've been overly critical of our mom here."
Yeah, well, he calls her what did he call her? Basically a dope head or something like that. It was that kind of
dope fiend.
Dope fiend. And because that's the second time the younger brother like physically like gets at him. Like, the first time was a shove where he pushes him down, and he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that," and he's like, "No, you should have. I'm being an ass." Like, you know, again, there's this constant thing where it's like reaction happens. It seems like it's getting heated, but then the character's like, "Yeah, no, I kind of deserve that." Like, we're like, there's this constant like just wrestling with their own feelings, which kind of feeds into that rubber banding of like being calm, getting angry, being calm, getting angry. It just happens too many times, like in the same scenes over and over again. is the main problem.
I mean, I wouldn't even mind it being this thing where it has this constant, like, trying to calm down and getting back, but it needs an escalation within the scene. It needs to feel like we are building towards something. Instead, it is a full just sinusoidal where it reaches a peak and then goes down to a valley, but it's staying constant with its peaks and valleys rather than building up.
Is realistic, I guess you could argue. I mean, other than the fact that how well spoken they are, which is obviously very like written and flowery. But in terms of the flow, yeah, that's maybe more like a real family because real life doesn't build to climaxes. It's not structured like a story. But we are watching a movie. We are watching a story, so it should have those elements as well. But, you know, because I like, again, the mood swings is something that happens throughout with all the characters. There's a scene in the middle where the wife is talking to Kathleen, the like the housemaid, like chef character, and she's trying to be nice with her and like reminisce and talk about her past. And this is like maybe the first time we even hear some of her convent pianist stuff. And as soon as this other character like asks a question or like even broaches a topic, like saying, "Oh, I can't see you as a nun. You're not that like holy or whatever." Like the demeanor of Mary just changes instantly and gets very kind of defensive, and it's just, again, anything can kind of set her off in the other direction, which makes sense because she's the drug addict and she likely is having mood swings when, you know, her morphine's kicking in or wearing off or whatever. But it kind of feels like in the fourth act, like everyone's like that. Like everyone, because they've been drinking, they all have an element of that to them where they're getting heightened and calming back down. Maybe Edmund's the only one who's not doing it himself, but he's often like the one in the receiving end of the other character going up and down. Yeah.
It feels like Edmund, his whole thing is that he has the TB. And don't get me wrong, he has this monologue where he talks about poetry and him wanting to go out on the sea and all this other stuff, because he did do traveling and stuff like that prior to the movie beginning. But it definitely feels like, in terms of the bitterness and the recrimination that the rest of the family feels, Edmund is by far and away the least. In turn, like, he actually does have some level of hope for this family, if only because he's been separated for so long from the daily in and out of it.
Yeah, and maybe just because he's younger, he's not had to suffer them as much as well because of that. Yeah, there's a few little hints to why that might be the case. Yeah, and obviously the movie doesn't give you any kind of answer. Is he going to survive this TB? Is he not? I mean, who knows? It's not for us to really say. It just kind of leaves them in this place where they're repeating the same patterns, and like, is there any hope for them as a group? Like, I mean, obviously you can say, all right, it's the writer's writing about his own family, and he's getting maybe a lot of their own demons out onto the page, and that's why it feels like they're very real characters, even though they're very well spoken. Because I'm assuming his family, well, maybe they were very smart people. Maybe they did say things in ways that were a bit more eloquent than other people, especially with the dad being an actual actor. I doubt it was this like well spoken in real life.
Oh yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's weird because, like, I actually just randomly, my algorithm gave me a video the other day of a actual like dictation that took place between people just talking in common. I think it was back in like the early 1700s. So obviously not this far back, but there was a lot of like flowery language. Like, people were able to do this just on command a lot easier, probably because, you know, you were more well read back then, at least in some parts of society. You had this idea of trying to imitate that because that's the only sort of access to media that you would have had. Maybe they did actually speak like this. I'm not saying that it's a guarantee, but I do think that as you go further back, just your normal talking, your normal language is a lot more well put. It's a lot more flowery in that way.
I have to imagine, though, that's like more of an upper class thing. Even like back in those time periods, I imagine the poor people didn't have access. Because I mean, if the main entertainment was either books or plays, then I can't imagine the super poor people were getting a lot of that. I mean, that was back in the sort of time where a lot of poor people wouldn't even be able to read, never mind, you know, afford it. So I think that maybe even feeds into this a little bit more as well, is this idea of like, oh, we're talking like we're hard done by, like we're a poor family, but we have a housemaid, we can talk like this. We have all these things. The son's been traveling. That's when he got sick, is because he was in the tropics, as they put it. Like, there's all these hints kind of building that there's like almost like almost like a victim complex, and they kind of all have that because they're all blaming each other. But it's, even the family as a whole, there's kind of this victim complex of how hard done by we are. I mean, they're a little bit self-centered, dare I say. I mean,
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's what I said at the beginning, is that it's something where the parents have this level of narcissism where they view themselves as the center of things. The mom is not thinking about her family as, I have to make sacrifices for this family or anything like that. It's everything that's asked of her feels like it is a death knell on all of her dreams. It is everything that she's ever wanted. She constantly says that this isn't a home, it's a prison. And then the dad just kind of has that same level of disdain for every single other member of his family, where he says that he loves his wife despite everything that happened, but that love doesn't take the form of affection and caring. It takes the form of, I'm going to care for you because you need it, and not really go beyond that in anything else.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Mary, the mom, is that she has this kind of like, this is a prison. You've robbed me of all my hopes and dreams by making me this family wife, this housewife, this mother. But I think that actually feeds into why she has these bursts of like, oh, Edmund can't be sick because I'll feel so guilty because I in some level like blame him for the death of the other kid. I blame him as part of the family unit for not being able to follow any of the dreams I had when I was younger. So I think there's this almost like part of the rubber banding for her specifically is feeling all this regret and like sadness about who she wanted to be, but then feeling guilty about that because that means she's not caring about her son who might be dying, and then overcompensating. Like when she gets really weepy and starts hugging him and saying, "Oh, please, please, I love you, my boy," it almost feels like she's trying to atone for what she was just feeling 5 minutes ago because she feels like a horrible mother. Like it feels like that's kind of part of what's at play here for her specifically.
Oh yeah, no, every time she says something that is a bit too mean, that feels like it's a bit too raw or true in her eyes, she immediately recoils and flips back onto the other side of like, never mind, let's talk about something else. Let's do anything else because I don't want to continue going down that path.
Yep. And it's repeated throughout the movie. And I think repetition to a point is a good thing here. It's because the point is to show that they keep falling into these same traps. It's just that because in the 3-hour runtime, everything repeats so much that by the time you get to the 7th, 8th time of something happening, you're like, again, 3 would have been enough to like get the point across. Rule of threes is very important for a reason. It's a nice thing where 1 is a solo thing, 2 is like, maybe not a coincidence, but like it doesn't feel like a trend yet. 3's a trend.
It's a callback.
Yeah. 2's a callback, 3's a trend, and that's it. You've nailed your thing. So, I think this is a really solid put together movie. I think the characters are really in depth. The performances are very good. All these things are absolutely true, but there's just this one fundamental thing of like, no, we're just going to do the play straight up. We're not going to adapt it for the medium what we're actually putting it into. And I think for some people, they may like that if they like the play because they'll be happy that all of those scenes are there, that all the dialogue's there. I think for people who are looking for a well-paced movie are going to struggle a little bit. Having said that, though, I will say that for as much as I'm saying that, it doesn't suffer as much as I would think it would have done if you told me this before I watched it.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. Us talking about it as much as we have been, I think there's going to be people who sit down and watch this and have no problem with this whatsoever. I think it's going to be something that they feel is very true to life. It's something that does happen within these families, and it is very realistic the way it's being portrayed on screen. I think that this is absolutely just us coming at it, not even with a modern sensibility, because I think even in 1962, the idea of having this building tension has been very well established in cinema at that point. So coming at it with this repetition, coming at it with the same thing over and over again, and going for 3 hours with it is a definitive choice that they had to make. And I think that it's something that just doesn't sit with us very well now.
Yeah, I don't think it's about an age thing, because I mean, this is the second movie of this season. It's the third Lumet film we've done, though, because we did 12 Angry Men prior to this season. And I think, I'll go back to 12 Angry Men is one of the best movies ever made. I think it's so tight, it's so well paced, it's got a great story, and it's directed immaculately. So I don't think the age is the issue here. I mean, maybe the play was written, earlier, so that maybe it feels a bit more old-fashioned because of that, and it's also set in 1912, although I assume that was already in the past when the play was written, just based on who the writer is. But I think it's just some creative choices that are made, and that's kind of it. I don't think it's like an old-fashioned thing, like you said. It's just the choices that were made, and it is what it is. But hey,
I mean, I do want to talk about, just real quick if we're wrapping up, that last shot, because it is kind of the only time that we break the concept that this is all happening in the house as an actual in the house thing. So as the mom is downstairs, she's in her morphine haze, whether she's on it or coming off it. Either way, she's not in her right state of mind. And she's just recounting. And like the other family is so tired. They're so done. They just let her go. Then no one interrupts her. Nobody does anything. And the camera is sitting around this kitchen table, following the rest of them. And then it slowly starts to pull out. But as it pulls out, it goes past the confines of the room. It just keeps going. It keeps zooming out. And all around this room is just blackness. There's nothing else outside.
Hold on, except because they referenced this earlier in the film, that out nearby there's a lighthouse, and you occasionally hear like a foghorn outside for the ships because they're next to the water. So there is a moment like halfway through this shot when it looks like they're surrounded by darkness, where some light sort of comes past the window from like a lighthouse. And it looks really cool. And it's like very kind of like atmospheric, and it feels like, and then it goes back to being darkness again. And it's this idea of darkness, a little bit of light, and then darkness again. What I thought was interesting though, is that I really thought as the camera was pulling back, it's going to just cut to black on a poignant sense. But it does something else. It actually cuts into extreme close-ups of all four of their faces, one by one, after she says something. And then it returns to the ultra-wide shot of them surrounded by darkness for like one more beat, and then it goes to the end. So I thought that was a very interesting thing to go back in for those tight close-ups of all four characters, and then return to that wide shot. Because it felt very stark, because most of the screen was black, right? Because it was like there was like this little circle of light around the table, surrounded by darkness. And then so when it cuts into a close-up, it feels like everything gets really bright again because you're right into someone's face and it's not black anymore. So I thought that was a really interesting visual, like almost percussion. It was like it was just rumbling the bass drum for like a minute and then crashed the cymbals when it cut into the close-up. Yeah, that worked really well.
That's again, like I was saying during the fourth act, there's a lot more quick cuts. It feels like this rising tension, but at that point, that's where it feels like it crests. It feels like the family has had their shouting match. They've done whatever they needed to do, and then they are literally about to fall asleep when the mom comes down and kind of just delivers this coda, delivers this sort of like calm. Nobody's interrupting. Nobody's talking over each other. She's lost in her own bliss at this moment, and having that slows.
Yeah, they're just all staring at her, and they're all just kind of sad because like no, she's gone. Like we expected, she is just off the deep end, and she's not with us anymore. Like she's on her own planet.
Yep. And as they're doing that zoom out, it's not a peaceful calm. It's a tragic calm.
Yeah,
it's this idea of the calm, like after the storm sort of thing. And you've got all of that zooming out, but having it do that quick cut in and showing these extreme close-ups of their face as she finishes up her monologue, it jolts you. It says like, this isn't going to last. This calm is going to break once again, and we're just going to keep going down this cycle.
Yep. So very, very well directed with the ending, as a good number of the sequences throughout are. David, what are you rating Long Day's Journey into Night out of 10?
I feel like we sounded somewhat negative over the course of this review because of us constantly saying like the length and feeling the repetition, all that. But I do want to make clear it's a good movie, and the rating I think is going to reflect that. I'm going to say Long Day's Journey into Night is a 7.5. I think that it is a well-made movie. It is good. It is bordering on that great category. But for me personally, it just doesn't quite reach it there. Maybe I'm missing some larger portion of this. Maybe it's whatever. I think on a play, like I said, on stage, this would have been great. I would have loved it. But adapted to film, something was missing, and it's just keeping it out of that great territory.
Yeah, I think I like Fugitive Kind more than this. I think Fugitive Kind was a better movie. Fugitive Kind had, a villain. It had a better character growth. The romance wasn't the best, but I think that it had more going on and felt like there was more escalating throughout the movie. So I do want to rate this lower than that. So I think I'm giving this just the 7, which is to say that it is still good. There's still a lot of things in here to appreciate and like, and even moments that I kind of love. I just don't think the movie ever quite lived up to those moments, like for the rest of it, if that makes sense. So,
right.
I think there's some one big problem to talk about, which is the lack of the proper adapting to the format, but still good overall, still worth watching if you're interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. However, then that does raise the question, does this make the cut?
I don't think, what did we do for Fugitive Kind?
We did makes the cut for Fugitive Kind.
We did makes the cut.
Yeah, if we did cutting it close, that would have made it very obvious, but now it's not so obvious.
It's very close. Between this and Fugitive Kind, I feel like they're very close. I came out with Fugitive Kind being a bit higher. I feel like you were the opposite.
I'd say I put them on equal footing, but for very different reasons.
Okay.
So for making the cut status, I've always viewed that much more of, whereas the number is like the technical of how we feel about it. This is more about the vibes. This is more about whether or not we personally would do it.
I get that.
But for me personally, cutting it close. I think that this is something that I think a lot of people would like, but it is on that fence, and having it be 3 hours means it is so much of a commitment to find out whether or not you like it. It really is going to come down to the individual.
I think that's a fair reasoning, and I think I would lean to more it's cutting it close. I think a 7 could go either way, because as much as you're right, the numbers don't necessarily dictate it, but they are a good starting guide to your thought process, and absolutely. I think a 7 can go either way, because I think there's like no possibility that a 9 does not make the cut, right? A 9 is making the cut regardless, but a 7 can go either way depending on the feelings. So I'll agree with the upper cutting it close as a result here.
Yeah.
So that is Long Day's Journey in tonight. Next time on the show, next part of Sidney Lumet season, we're looking at The Pawnbroker from 1964. So we'll see how that is next time.
I'm checking the link now.
Go on.
Seeing whether or not I'm going to have to devote an entire day to this one.
I think it'll be hour 45. That's my guess.
Hour 56.
That's under 2 hours. Fine.
Yep.
Normal movie. That's fine. So that's next week on the show is The Pawnbroker. Obviously, you can check out the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is our sci-fi movie show as well. We just did some interesting stuff on there, like Save the Green Planet and Moon. So if that sounds like fun, go check out those. It's me and David talking about movies, just like this show, but not in seasons. I've been tempted to do seasons on Ace, maybe not all the time, but sometimes. But then I stop and think about it and go, but if we do like 5 Universal Soldiers in a row, no one will watch the show for a month.
What do you mean we lost 50 subscribers in one day? What are you talking about?
No one cares about the adventures of Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren that much.
I will say, I don't know if you want to officially announce it, but just to tease it, we do have an upcoming recurring theme that's going to be on the show.
Oh, sure, yeah. So the counterpoint to like not doing seasons on Ace, like Collector's Cut, is that we're going to do either once every 2 months or once every month. It's still kind of up in there. But we're going to go through the Godzilla franchise at a sort of consistent pace. So not every episode, but kind of a consistent intervals. We'll come back and keep doing Godzilla movies. So that's a whole thing. We've done a lot of the big sci-fi franchises already, though. You can go back and check those out. They're all in playlists on YouTube, or just go back down the podcast feed and find them. That's pretty much it. I'll tell you about Patreon. You can support the show and help keep it coming via patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. little bit of money goes a long way. Which, why are you laughing at that, David?
I just like the way you say it.
Okay. But yes, you can support us there and get access to the ratings rundown where we talk about some extra categories when we're rating the movies. So for, we do best, what are the visuals out of 10, audio, acting, script. We give out the sexual tension award if that sounds like fun. It's usually silly. So, go check out that. Plus, every month we do a bonus show called Extra Reels where we review some of the worst movies of all time. Recent hits include Love on a Leash and Joker Folie Adieu and Get Even and stuff. Although Get Even was a public episode, so you can check that one out for yourself if you want to test the waters. Yeah. But the main reason is to support the show, help keep it coming along with Ace and all the other shows on Mail Fuzz Movies. So thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.